Uncle borrowed my classic car for one day, sold it for gambling debts. Then I learned, truth, my Uncle Tommy borrowed my fully restored 1967 Mustang Fastback for what he called one romantic evening with his new girlfriend. 3 weeks later, I discovered he'd sold it to some collector in Beverly Hills for $45,000 to pay off his gambling debts. The same car I'd spent 2 years and every weekend restoring piece by piece. The same car my grandfather left me before he died. The same car that was supposed to stay in our family forever. I still remember the exact moment I found out. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was in my garage in Riverside, working on a '73 Camaro when my neighbor Rick knocked on the door. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he had bad news to deliver. "Hey man, I saw your Mustang at Barrett-Jackson last weekend," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Looked exactly like yours. Same paint job, same interior. Thought you might want to know." My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen the car in 3 weeks, not since Tommy picked it up with promises of returning it the next day. Every time I called, he had another excuse. The girlfriend loved it so much they extended their weekend trip. Then it was in the shop, getting detailed as a thank you gesture. Then he was visiting his sick friend in Sacramento. I pulled up the Barrett-Jackson auction, listings on my phone with shaking hands. There it was, 1967, Ford Mustang Fastback, Acapulco blue with white racing stripes, completely restored, sold for $47,500. The photos showed every detail I remembered, the custom chrome I'd installed, the racing seats I'd reupholstered myself, even the small dent on the rear bumper from when my grandfather backed into a fire hydrant in 1985. My chest felt like someone was standing on it. This wasn't just any car. This was the car my grandfather taught me to drive in when I was 12, sneaking me around empty parking lots on Sunday afternoons while my parents were at church. This was the car that inspired me to become an auto restorer in the first place, the reason I'd spent 8 years learning everything about classic American muscle cars. This was supposed to be my legacy, something I'd pass down to my own kids someday. I called Tommy immediately, my hands still shaking as I dialed. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again, same thing. Then I drove to his apartment complex in Corona, a rundown place that always smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. His neighbor, Mrs. Gonzalez, told me he'd moved out to that Siohul weeks ago in the middle of the night, leaving half his furniture behind. Updated. Just found out the car sold for even more than I thought. $47,500 at Barrett-Jackson. Tommy's disappeared completely, left his apartment, changed his number. Starting to realize this wasn't just about borrowing the car. Should I have seen the signs earlier? Tommy had always been the family screw-up, but he was family. He was my mom's younger brother, the guy who showed up to Christmas dinner with a black eye and stories about business deals gone wrong. My mom always made excuses for him. He'd had a rough divorce, he was struggling to find his footing, he just needed someone to believe in him. Growing up, I actually looked up to Uncle Tommy. He drove cool cars, dated beautiful women, and always had cash in his pocket. He'd slip me $20 bills at family gatherings and tell me stories about racing motorcycles in Vegas or playing poker with celebrities. To a kid from suburban Riverside, Tommy seemed like he lived the kind of exciting life I saw in movies. The warning signs were always there, but we ignored them. Family jewelry would go missing when Tommy visited. My aunt's silverware set disappeared after he house sat for her. My cousin's iPad vanished from a family barbecue. But Tommy always had explanations, and more importantly, he always had my mom, making excuses for him. When my grandfather died 3 years ago, he left me the Mustang in his will. It had been sitting in his garage for 15 years, covered in dust and slowly deteriorating. The engine hadn't run since 2008. The interior was cracked and faded, and rust was eating through the quarter panels. But underneath all that neglect was a genuine 1967 Fastback with the original 390 V8 engine, a car worth restoring. I spent every weekend for 2 years bringing it back to life. I learned to weld by watching YouTube videos and practicing on scrap metal behind my apartment. I sourced original parts from junkyards across California, driving hundreds of miles to find the right chrome trim or the correct steering wheel. I taught myself upholstery work, spent months researching the exact paint codes, and invested over $25,000 of my own money into parts and tools. The restoration became my obsession, my therapy, my connection to my grandfather. Every time I worked on that car, I felt like he was there with me, guiding my hands as I adjusted the carburetor or aligned the body panels. When I finally got it running again, when I heard that 390 V8 rumble to life for the first time in over a decade, I actually cried. 3 weeks after Tommy disappeared, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to just file a police report and hope for the best. I wasn't going to trust the system to find my car or my uncle. I was going to track down that collector in Beverly Hills myself and get my Mustang back, whatever it took. I hired a private investigator named Maria Santos, a former LAPD detective who specialized in recovered stolen vehicles. She was expensive, $150 an hour, but she had connections throughout Southern California's classic car scene. Within 2 days, she'd identified the buyer, Jonathan Whitfield, a real estate developer who owned a private collection of over 50 classic cars in a warehouse in Culver City. Maria arranged a meeting under the pretense of me being interested in selling my own classic car collection. Whitfield agreed to see us on a Saturday afternoon, probably thinking he was about to make another deal. His warehouse was incredible. Rows of pristine vehicles from the 1950s through the 1980s, each one worth more than most people's houses. And there, in the back corner, was my Mustang. Seeing it again was like running into an ex-girlfriend who'd left you for someone richer. It looked perfect, better than perfect actually. Whitfield had already made some modifications. New chrome, wheels that probably cost $5,000, a custom leather interior in British racing green instead of the original black. He'd improved the car, but he'd also erased some of its history, some of the imperfections that made it mine. Whitfield was in his 60s, well-dressed, the kind of guy who wore a Rolex to casual meetings. He seemed genuinely surprised when I explained the situation. He pulled out a folder with the sale documentation, bills of sale, title transfer, even photos of Tommy handing over the keys. Your uncle seemed legitimate, Whitfield told me, flipping through the paperwork. He had all the proper documentation, said he was selling it to help with his daughter's medical bills. Tommy didn't have a daughter. That's when Whitfield said something that made my blood run cold. You know, this is actually the third car I've bought from your uncle over the years. Maria and I exchanged glances. I asked him to explain. Whitfield walked over to a filing cabinet and pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. I bought a 1969 Camaro from him 2 years ago, and a 1965 Corvette about 4 years back. Same story each time. Family emergency, needed quick cash, had all the proper paperwork. He showed me the photos. Both cars were beautiful, professionally restored, obviously someone's pride and joy. Both sales documented the same way, both with Tommy's signature, both sold well below market value for quick cash. I always wondered why he was willing to sell such beautiful cars so cheaply, Whitfield continued. But I figured that was his business. I paid fair prices, maybe not full market value, but fair for quick cash sales. Maria asked if he had contact information for any of the previous owners, any way to verify Tommy's ownership of those vehicles. Whitfield's face went pale as he realized what we were suggesting. You're telling me these might have been stolen too? Over the next hour, Whitfield showed us his entire collection, pointing out 12 vehicles he'd purchased from Tommy over the past decade. 12 classic cars, each one obviously restored with love and care, each one sold by my uncle for gambling, money. A 1970 Plymouth Cuda that probably belonged to some grandfather in Arizona. A 1968 Mustang GT500 that looked like someone's life work. A 1967 Camaro SS that still had a child's car seat brackets in the back, suggesting it belonged to a young father trying to hold on to his muscle car dreams. We were looking at the remnants of Tommy's decade-long crime spree, a systematic theft of family heirlooms and dream cars, all sold to feed his gambling addiction. Whitfield had unknowingly become a fence for stolen classic cars, and I had stumbled into the middle of it. The most chilling part was the pattern. Tommy didn't steal from strangers. He stole from family members, people who trusted him, people who wouldn't immediately suspect theft when their beloved uncle asked to borrow their car for a weekend. He'd probably been watching family members restore these cars for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. Maria took photos of everything while Whitfield called his lawyer. The legal situation was complicated. Whitfield had purchased the cars in good faith with seemingly legitimate paperwork, but they were still stolen property. My Mustang alone was worth more than $50,000 now with Whitfield's improvements, but it was legally mine regardless of how much he'd paid Tommy. Such a real shock came when Whitfield's assistant brought us a box of additional documentation. Mixed in with repair receipts and insurance papers were letters. Actual handwritten letters from Tommy to various family members over the years. Letters asking to borrow cars for special occasions, letters promising to take good care of family, heirlooms, letters apologizing for keeping cars longer than expected. There was a letter to my cousin Danny about borrowing his restored Camaro for a wedding. A letter to my uncle Bob about needing the Corvette for a business meeting that could change his life. A letter to someone named Patricia about borrowing her late husband's Plymouth for a car show. Each letter was crafted perfectly, hitting exactly the right emotional notes, appealing to family loyalty and trust. Tommy wasn't just a gambler who'd made some bad decisions. He was a sophisticated con artist who'd been systematically robbing his own family for a decade. Updated. Found the collector who bought my car. Turns out Tommy's been stealing family cars for 10 years. The guy has 12 stolen classics in his warehouse. This is way bigger than I thought. How many families has he destroyed? The next few weeks became a blur of police reports, insurance claims, and family phone calls that no one wanted to make. Maria helped me contact the authorities in 3 different counties where Tommy had apparently been active. The case quickly expanded from simple auto theft to organized fraud across state lines. Whitfield, to his credit, cooperated fully with the investigation. He provided all documentation, agreed to return the stolen vehicles to their rightful owners, and even offered to cover the legal costs for families who couldn't afford attorneys. His lawyer worked with prosecutors to ensure he wouldn't face charges for unknowingly purchasing stolen goods. The hardest part was calling the other victims. Using the letters and documentation from Whitfield's files, Maria and I tracked down 8 other families across California, Arizona, and Nevada. Each conversation was heartbreaking. Danny cried when I told him we'd found his Camaro. He'd spent 3 years thinking his beloved uncle had died in an accident with the car. Patricia had given up looking for her husband's Plymouth years ago, assuming Tommy had sold it legally and used the money for drugs. Every victim had the same story. Tommy approached them during a difficult time, offered help or companionship, gained their trust, then asked to borrow their most precious possession for a special occasion. He'd disappear for weeks before anyone realized the cars were actually gone, and by then he'd already sold them and vanished. The criminal investigation revealed the scope of Tommy's operation. He'd been stealing from family members across the Southwest for 12 years, not just cars, but jewelry, electronics, and cash. He had gambling debts totaling over $200,000 at casinos in Las Vegas, Reno, and Indian reservations throughout California. He'd been living off family theft for more than a decade. When they finally arrested Tommy, he was living in a motel room in Laughlin, Nevada, trying to set up another con involving a cousin's motorcycle collection. He'd lost 40 pounds, looked 20 years older than his age, and initially tried to deny everything until police showed him the evidence Maria and I had compiled. The legal process was complex, but eventually, all 12 vehicles were returned to their families. My Mustang came back with Whitfield's improvements still intact. He insisted I keep the upgrades as compensation for my troubles. The car was now worth significantly more than when Tommy stole it, but the emotional damage couldn't be calculated. Tommy pled guilty to multiple counts of auto theft, fraud, and grand larceny across 4 states. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with restitution orders totaling over $300,000. The judge specifically noted the breach of family trust as an aggravating factor in sentencing. 2 years later, my Mustang sits in my garage exactly where it belongs, but everything feels different now. The car runs perfectly, looks better than ever, but I can't work on it without thinking about Tommy's decade of family betrayal. Some innocence was lost that can never be restored. The family has slowly healed, but relationships have changed permanently. We're more cautious now, more aware that trust can be weaponized by people who know exactly how to exploit it. Family gatherings feel different when you know someone spent years planning to steal from everyone in the room. I still restore classic cars, but now I also volunteer with a victim support group for people who've been defrauded by family members. It's more common than anyone realizes. The people closest to us often have the best opportunities to hurt us because we trust them the most. Tommy will be eligible for parole in 4 years. I don't know if I'll attend his hearing, or what I'd say if I did. The uncle I looked up to as a kid never really existed. He was always a con artist, always calculating his next score, always viewing family as marks rather than people who loved him. The Mustang represents something different. To me now, it's not just a connection to my grandfather's memory, or a symbol of my restoration skills. It's proof that some things can be recovered, that justice sometimes works, and that families can survive even the deepest betrayals. Updated. Tommy got 8 years. All 12 cars returned to families. My Mustang's back, but trust in family is forever. Changed. Some wounds heal, others become wisdom. Worth fighting for what's rightfully yours?